Hey Fuse, what is up? Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. Hey, this weekend we're going to do a one-off message, okay? And so here's what I want you guys to know before we go into this. This is definitely a different sermon than you've heard before. And so as we go in, just take a few seconds, okay? After I get off the screen, take a few seconds just to get your hearts ready, get your mind ready, because this is going to be a message like you've never heard before. You guys ready for it? Are you sure? Let's go. We're living in a day and time where I believe there is more division than any other time in your lifetime. You've never experienced anything like this. It started with COVID. At first, I would say almost everyone was on the same page. You know, we were all taking the pandemic seriously. No one went anywhere for the first month. And when we did, we bought all the masks, all the toilet paper, all the hand sanitizers we could find. Well, fast forward to today, and I'd say we're kind of split if you ask me. Chances are that at least half of you don't practice social distancing or wear face covering if you don't have to. You're masked out, while the rest of you feel naked if you took your mask off. The second one is race. And where do I even start? Should I start? Can I even talk about it? It is such a sensitive topic, but honestly, for some people, including myself, it is more than just a topic of conversation. It's our reality. It's our life and it's our livelihood, our past and our future. It is so much more, but people are divided on this tension, so we find ourselves silent. And last, politics. For the last few weeks, the political climate in America has gotten intense, and I truly fear how people are going to handle the results because there's so much hatred on both sides. And, thankfully the voting is behind us, but unfortunately, we're not done living in this tension. So here we are in the middle of it, in the middle of a divided country. And trust me, there are more ways that our country is divided. I just chose to highlight these three. But we could easily add gender equality to the list and talk about the value women have in our society, and also the increased use of recreational drugs and vaping that has trickled all the way down into middle school kids. The truth is, we can't escape this truth. We're divided on these topics as a country. But what's God's truth? What does He have to say about all of this? Well, here's what you need to know. God sent His Son Jesus to this world to more than die for you. He also sent Him to live for you. Now, what do I mean by that? God sent Jesus to be the perfect example of what we should do, how we should live. If you think about how Jesus arrived on earth, how His birth was predicted and foreshadowed throughout the Old Testament, most Jewish people, they knew about the Messiah coming to save them, but what they didn't predict, what they didn't know, was how He was going to do it. Let me explain. At the time of Jesus' ministry, there were three different groups of power. You had the Roman government, who everyone feared because at the time they were like dominating and conquering all the cities and all the people groups. But you also had the religious leaders, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, maybe you've heard of them before, who would often abuse their knowledge of God's law, His words, to subjugate Jews and elevate themselves. And then you had another group, the Zealots, the revolutionaries, the rebels, whose desire was to overthrow the Roman government. And Simon, one of Jesus' disciples, actually was a part of this group. Now, if Jesus had aligned Himself to any of these groups, it would have granted them a significant advantage over the others. If He had led the charge with the Zealots to topple Rome by persuading the 5,000 men He fed plus the other 3,000 men He fed in a different day, history would have been rewritten. Because I'm telling you, food meant a lot to them back then, and it does now too. But for me, it would almost be like if someone offered me like free Carters for a year, man, I'd be signing up for basic training. Now, if he had misused his knowledge of scriptures and the interpretation of it, he could have easily elevated himself as like the chief religious leader who would shape the faith of all Jews, not only in Jerusalem, but in the surrounding towns. He'd be like, I don't know, the modern day version of the Pope. If he had sided with Rome, think about what he could do there. Think about how he could use his divine power to make them wealthy, wealthier than they could ever imagine. They wouldn't need to oppress the Jewish people because they'd be so rich. He could turn 5 gold coins into thousands. He could turn water into wine. Rome would be set for life, and his people, the Jewish people, would be left alone, not under the Roman government. But Jesus knew that if he aligned himself on any of these sides, if he planted his flag on any of these beliefs and aided their cause through his words or actions, it would mean he couldn't reach the other side. Because you can't solve problems there. You can't love people well there, and so you won't find Jesus there. So Jesus refused to play their game of tug of war. He refused to take either end of the rope. He was the king who came to reverse the order of things. Instead, what he did was he prayed. When he saw the division among his disciples, among the groups of people fighting for power, when he saw the division in the world, he prayed this prayer in John 17. I am praying not only for these disciples, but also for all who will ever believe in me through their message. Guys, listen, Jesus prayed for his 11 disciples, but he also had the heart and the vision to pray beyond them. He prayed for those who would come to faith by the testimony of his disciples. He prayed for us. Verse 21 says, I pray that they will all be one, just as you and I are one, as you are in me, Father, and I am in you. Jesus envisioned the great multitude before the throne of God, of every nation, every race, every language, class, and social level. Jesus prayed that they might rise above their different backgrounds and understand their unity, that they may all be one. And may they be in us so that the world will believe you sent me. And this is a remarkable statement, okay? Jesus is essentially giving the world permission to judge the validity of his ministry based on the unity of his people. So unity amongst God's people helps the world believe that the Father sent the Son. Verse 22, I have given them the glory you gave me, so they may be one as we are one. I am in them and you are in me. May they experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you sent me and that you love them as much as you love me. Guys, he says it again. This further emphasizes the importance of unity and love amongst Christians. It is as if Jesus gave the world permission to doubt both his mission and his love if the world does not see unity and love amongst believers. Christians have a great responsibility to display Jesus to the world through their love and through their unity. But oftentimes, Christians are too quick to blame one another for an unbelieving world. Verse 24 says, Father, I want these whom you have given to me to be with me where I am. Then they can see the glory you gave me because you loved me even before the world began. The words I want, they mean something. You see, Jesus is longing for the completion of all things. He's greatly desiring all his people to be gathered with him in heaven. Jesus longed for heaven's completion of all things. That's his prayer for us. Remember, we're talking about Jesus, the Son of God. Not only set the example, but he prayed and he desired love and unity amongst his people and on really all people. You want to know what love looks like? What love sounds like, feels like, just follow Jesus around the gospel. You want to know what unity looks like, unity sounds like, what it feels like? Just follow Jesus around the gospel. But Paul also follows up in Philippians and says, though he was God, he did not think of equality with God as something to cling to. He did not use it to his own advantage. In other words, guys, he did not play to win. He was not in it to win it, at least not the way the first century people would or even 21st century people would think. Jesus played to lose, so the other team, that would be you, that would be me, so we could win. This is why he never took sides, because neither side was willing to lose for the sake of the other. And verse 7 in Philippians 2 says this, instead, he gave up his divine privileges, he took the humble position of a slave and was born as a human being. Do you know how a slave lived? A slave would wake up every morning and think, how can I serve others today? If we're Christ followers, this is what we should look like. Now, if this scares you, which it should, because you don't want to lose something, then you understand how the disciples felt when he was arrested and crucified, because to them, that wasn't winning. Even though he told them over and over and over again and predicted his own death, they didn't believe him. If Jesus could have used his divinity to win, to take himself down from the cross, and he didn't, what about you and your power? If Jesus could have used his wisdom, everything he knew, to win, and he didn't, what about your limited knowledge? If Jesus could have used his influence to win and he didn't, he chose not to, what about your influence? What about what you post on social media? Don't miss this. The best possible person would suffer the worst possible death to illustrate that even the Son of Man didn't come to win among the kingdoms of this world, but to establish a new one on love and unity. Because there's no first or last in his kingdom. There's no winning or losing. And so while your parents may have voted and stand for their rights as American citizens to vote, based on the Constitution, as the body of Christ, as Christians, when we act as the body of Christ, it should never be for our own interests, but for the interests of others. Which kind of reminds me of some of the conversations I usually have in some marriage counseling that I do. And there's some books that we would read. There's a book called His Needs, Her Needs, and one called Love and Respect. And when we read those, there's a couple things that they have in common. And basically what it's saying is, as a husband or as a wife, if your main goal is to focus on just loving the other person and valuing them, serving them, then by a byproduct of you loving and giving of yourself, they will do the same. If you love unconditionally, if you serve unconditionally, if you care and are kind unconditionally, if you help unconditionally, eventually that will be reciprocated to you. What am I saying? Jesus, he calls us to love and he calls us to live in unity. But sometimes we have to take that first step. And when we do, when we constantly take that first step and lead by example, chances are the person on the other side will reciprocate exactly what we are giving them, love and unity. Thank you guys for joining us. See you next week.